Welcome to the new episode of the podcast On the Spot. My name is Jovan Jovanovic. I'm former Serbian ambassador to Indonesia and ASEAN, and also former member of the Serbian National Assembly. Today's topic is the dynamics of the peace effort on Ukraine, and also change dynamics of transatlantic relations and inter-European relations. And today I have great honor and pleasure and privilege to host Professor Vlad Mykhnenko, Professor of Geography and Political Economy at Oxford University. He has been involved in many UK efforts related to recovery of Ukraine by the U.S. House of Commons, the Foreign Affairs Committee. He's also commissioner for the Lancet Commission on Ukraine. He's also advising the mayor of Mariupol and a local authority in exile on the Mariupol Reborn. He's from Donetsk because he's also personally affected by the war in Ukraine. So Vlad, thank you so much for accepting my invitation again.
Thanks, Johan. Thanks for inviting. Really excited to be on your podcast.
Well, let's start. When we started discussing this interview, we thought, at least I thought, and I think many thought that we would discuss the deal made on mineral deal and maybe broader between Ukraine and the US. But we had this fiasco meeting on Friday in the Oval Office, and only in the last 7 days, so many things has happened. According to the famous Chinese proverb, unfortunately, we live in very interesting times. And we had two important visits to U.S. President Macron's, Prime Minister Starmer, then aforementioned meeting of President Zelensky and Trump. Then we have the Coalition of the Willing meeting in London. Yesterday, extraordinary NATO meeting without the U.S. And then Trump's administration just last night announced that they would stop the military aid to Ukraine. So let's start maybe with this meeting on Friday and your takes and the consequences. Do you agree with my friend, former U.S. ambassador to Moscow, Michael McFaul, that this was just a sideshow for Trump, this meeting with Zelensky? Then Trump's main intention is to court Putin, to make a deal with him, and then impose a deal in the others. And then we take into account these statements of the U.S. Senior officials, and also by John Mearsheimer, a famous academic, U.S. academic, that Zelensky should resign. How realistic is that Ukraine-U.S. negotiations would continue on the mineral deal? And, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte just urged Zelensky to mend a relationship with Trump.
Also, things to discuss. Just from the last point, I think it's nice that the European allies of Ukraine are trying to mend defenses and build the bridges. It's all fine. And if President Macron, Prime Minister Starmer of Britain, Giorgia Meloni of Italy, Recep Erdogan of Turkey, if anybody can sort of salvage something out of it, that's great. But I don't think that's possible. Not only because John Mearsheimer says so. I didn't hear his comments.
Yes,
he's a gift that keeps on giving. One thing, John Mearsheimer was right. Right. There is one thing I agree with John Mearsheimer, is his 1994 article that Ukraine should not give up nuclear weapons. There is one thing that is like a broken clock that once was totally correct. And I think we need to go back to Mearsheimer 1994. That's absolutely true. And I'm sure we'll mention that. What is interesting is I've been listening to U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and also Trade Secretary Lutnick, who I think kind of revealed a little bit of detail of that Disaster Friday event. It seems to me, and you've been also listening to various other people. Maybe I'm incorrect, so let's discuss. It looks to me that Zelensky was brought to the U.S. To Washington D.C. to the Oval Office to effectively, formally or informally agree on capitulation first, and then to sign a minerals deal as a sort of a lipstick on a pig, as British people call it, moment. And he realized that gradually what is going on, and hence he started to oppose the surrender, unconditional surrender that was forced upon him by U.S. administration. I think that is the main point, because Scott Bessent in his afterwards interviews to various outlets said that President Zelensky destroyed the sequencing. It was peace deal first, then minerals deal second. We haven't seen the so-called peace deal at all. We don't know what is in it. We can only speculate. And my speculation, it is a Istanbul surrender offer that the Russians gave Ukraine back in April 2022 when the Russian troops were in Kiev, right? So they're bringing back that horrible capitulation document and forcing it on, and try to force it on Zelensky formally and informally before signing up the rather inconsequential minerals deal, which as I've read it, I'm not as spooked as anybody else. So I think that was the actual context of what happened in the 40 minutes of the press. It wasn't a press conference; it was a press conference, but a kind of strange event in the Oval Office full of people asking crazy questions.
Mm-hmm. So, but let's go, because we were to discuss this deal. So what were the major points of the deal that were negotiated, and the creation of this reconstruction fund for the Ukraine? And also, how is the opinion in Ukraine on that deal? Would it be accepted by the Ukrainians? And how much the security guarantees were discussed related to this mineral deal, or it was just implied that huge US investment would also provide security guarantees to Ukraine?
There is a sentence in that agreement that says that US will support Ukraine's security and prosperity, and this is one way of doing it. Well, yeah, I mean, I support your healthy lifestyle, Jovan, and you support mine. I mean, that's great. But how am I doing that? I'm not sure. So there is nothing about security there. Also, if we really dig into this, we are talking about effectively mineral wealth of all kinds, not just rare earth or critical minerals. Mineral wealth, including oil and gas. Coal is not included. Coal is not mentioned, but coal is in there.
Okay.
And also the infrastructure, the ports and pipelines. And we're talking about the mineral wealth that is currently not been developed, or currently not been in state-owned assets. So 50% of which should go to the reconstruction fund. Presumably 50% of it should go to the US, right? I mean, because there is 50% there Ukraine is going to commit to the reconstruction fund. So the other half presumably go to Washington, D.C., to the American taxpayers, or to the private companies as profits. But the thing is that everyone who knows anything about mining knows that it is a very difficult thing to do, an extremely expensive thing to do. And it takes decades to develop, right? It takes decades to build mines, to start digging it, to bring in people. You need enormous amount of electricity. You need enormous amount of water. You need enormous amount of resource. So we are talking about 10, 15, 20, 25-year scenario in which presumably a private American contractor comes in, a mining company, which Americans don't have. The largest mining companies are Australian and Canadian, strangely enough, right? So there are no huge American mining companies of that scale. Okay, let's imagine there is one. Let's imagine Anglo-American or Rio Tinto comes in under American flag and starts doing something. That would take decades. First of exploration, figure out what is in it, whether it's worth anything, how to, we're talking about 25 years, right? From the beginning to maybe some profits. So I wouldn't worry about profits, because I think there may not be none profits there. But to claim that this is a security guarantee, which Americans have no mining companies to guarantee it, I think it's disingenuous. So it'd be great if Zelensky could sign it, but the point is that I don't think that was the main deal. The main deal was to sign a capitulation, a surrender, and then sign this as a kind of a fig leaf moment. So I think that is why we have seen that astonishing scenes that we've seen.
So how much this Friday meeting caused further deterioration of transatlantic relations and pushed Europe towards strategic autonomy and changed the dynamics of the peace process? And what's your take on this weekend meeting of the coalition of the willing and four-pillar peace plan, and how it should be operationalized, because it's more of a wish list than concrete measures.
Yeah, I think the Vice President J.D. Vance speech in Munich during Munich Security Conference, I presume, should have been the final warning to the Europeans, and I presume it was the final warning. I hope, Jovan, that all this noise is coming from Rutte, Giorgia Meloni, Starmer, Macron, trying to patch up things, is just a moment to buy time. I think all of them understand what's going on. All of them understand that the North Atlantic Treaty Organization is dead, and the Article 5 doesn't exist anymore, because it won't be enforced by the main person who is supposed to enforce it. So I hope and I believe that people understand what is going on. So you have a dismantling of NATO from within. In addition that to two Trojan horses that already exist within it of Hungary and Slovakia, right? So a new architecture, security architecture, needs to be constructed with a coalition of the willing, people who are willing and are worried about security. And that probably will not include all the 30-odd members of NATO now, currently, as they currently stand. So I presume the coalition, looking forward, I think the coalition of the willing will be the beginning of the new NATO-like European Security Organization, Defense Organization that have to be created. Mm-hmm. Obviously, NATO was created as an asymmetrical organization from its inception. It was designed like that. Yeah, when Trump claims that we were paying for European security, and J.D. Vance, remember, published an article in Financial Times about a year ago saying exactly what's going to happen. We're going to just pull back. We're going to walk away. We didn't listen, or people didn't listen, because people thought they would not get elected. But he already described everything was going to happen, right? So this is, I think, the beginning of new things, and it will take time, sadly, for the European leaders to understand the gravity of this moment. But I think it's very obvious. It's staring in your face, the problem that they have. And so they need to move very, very fast. We hear some positive noises from Norway these coming days, right? They have enormous amount of money. They have accumulated quite a lot of windfall profits from gas and oil during the war. And they're willing, as far as I understand, to share that with Ukraine, which is great. So what needs to be done now is try to get the stuff that Americans are not going to give away, to buy it, and then send it to Ukraine. And that's probably the maximum that can be achieved, right? Mm-hmm. To buy the Patriot interception missiles, to buy ATACMS missiles, to get the infantry fighting vehicles, to get the other types of equipment. Try to maintain, if possible, the intelligence cover, the satellite cover, Starlink, right, and intelligence sharing. Try to maintain that for as long as possible, even if Americans are not giving that now, but I presume they will be willing to sell it, given that they're all mercantilistic. So I think that will be probably the lowest common denominator. Ukraine needs air defense. Ukraine needs anti-missile, Patriot missiles. It needs all the good American stuff. It needs still, and let's hope that the kind of Trump-friendly regimes across the world can get that, can buy it from the US, mm-hmm. Which is not a given.
Mm-hmm. So, speaking of Europe, is this week with this EU summit in Brussels this Thursday maybe pivotal for European security? And will Europe use this rupture in transatlantic relations to assume this greater, also global role? And is maybe one of the impediments a fear of some countries that of the EU Commission's power grab on defense?
My hope is that the Franco-German engine of European integration can be restored. And my hope is that what needs to happen in the German coalition talks needs to go really, really fast now, right? There is no time of bickering about months and months and months. This is not Belgium, right? This is a really serious situation and a serious country that needs to be on the negotiating table now. So Friedrich Merz needs to finish this coalition negotiations as soon as possible, get into the driving seat alongside Emmanuel Macron and start doing stuff that Franco-German alliance has been doing for decades and decades during the European integration, starting from the EU 12. I think a serious conversation needs to be had within the EU about the Trojan horses that they have, what to do with them, how the two countries can derail any effort and veto everything. I mean, I don't think that is in the spirit of European integration. I don't think that is in the spirit of all the agreements that they signed, Hungary and Slovakia signed. So I'm sure they could find a legal way of sort of putting a halt to their vetoes, which are increasingly annoying to everyone. And the same way, I think the defense architecture has to go beyond the EU, right, Johan? Because Norway is a crucial part of NATO. UK is a crucial part of NATO. So Turkey is a crucial part of NATO. So the European Defense Alliance has to go beyond the EU, which creates some complications. But on the other hand, it brings in capabilities that France and Germany do not have, right? Mm-hmm. So the security infrastructure, the security architecture needs to involve non-EU members, obviously, including Ukraine now, as it currently stands. But within the EU, they need to have some serious, difficult conversations as well that they've postponed for decades and decades. I mean, remember that Viktor Orban has been in place for quite a long time. Yeah, he's been a pain in the neck even Angela Merkel already then complained about various antics from Budapest. But now I think the situation is much more serious, given that they are effectively Russian allies, right? You cannot have Russian allies within a democratic liberal institution. I mean, that's neither you can have US.
Mm-hmm. So if I understood you well, you believe that this coalition of willing in the future will assume much broader role, not only related to the war in Ukraine and bringing peace to Ukraine.
Yes, because flying, enforcing no-fly zone over, say, Western Ukraine, mm-hmm. with British and French air power will involve quite an enormous logistical effort. Mm-hmm. Let's hope that, Trump-friendly people can get Trump to agree at least a minimal level of support. They have not technically withdrawn from NATO yet, so technically there is some kind of still stuff in place that the Americans can provide logistically. But if that happens, then obviously the magnitude and the scale of the problem, of the task, will involve more and more countries than UK and France, right? Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, everybody got involved because they are there, they are in that space. So I think gradually let's say, I don't know what to call it, peacekeeping mission, ceasefire mission, I don't know, the protection of Ukraine mission, Ukraine reassurance force, I think another phrase that we use. So Ukraine reassurance force will gradually grow bigger because of the magnitude of the problem and the scale. And if the Germans get involved, then obviously it will become a much more European force, mm-hmm. A much more pan-European force.
Mm-hmm. You already talked about that a bit, but maybe you can expand it more, and maybe we can conclude our conversation with that. So what is the way forward in this peace process, and how is it viable, this President Macron's suggestion for a 30-day partial truce, and what kind of security guarantees are necessary for Ukraine having this great level of distrust towards Putin and Russia?
President Macron's idea is great, of course, especially given the fact that Ukraine is running out of Patriot missiles. So if you prevent attacks on energy grids and power infrastructure and civilians, that would be great. Yeah, and easily visible as well. Unlike the ceasefire over thousands of miles of front line, that would be less visible and difficult to enforce, or at least to monitor, right? So that's a good idea. Uh, Security guarantees. The basic thing, the default position. What would it take for Coca-Cola to build a Coca-Cola plant on the front line, right? In Oleksiivka, Donetsk Oblast. What would it take for a private investor from the West to come in and develop a facility in Ukraine now? What kind of guarantees that the private sector needs to have to invest, presumably long term, presumably 3 to 5 years at least. This is what needs to be asked. Really, you can just turn this around and ask, okay, Ukraine's reconstruction needs are running now above $500 billion. So if you are to get $500 billion into Ukraine to rebuild the damage, people who have the $500 billion, we need to tell you what they need, right? And I suspect they will tell you exactly what they need. What kind of guarantees do they need? So either you are to give them an assurance that if they lose $500 billion, they're gonna give them $500 billion as a loss, some kind of guarantee of investment, right? But no country will be able to afford that on that scale. Or then you have to protect those assets physically, and hence you need boots on the ground, or you need some kind of Article 5 moment, or you need a nuclear weapon that is somewhere, that is reachable, that can reach Moscow as well. So you need one of those things needs to be there in place. Presumably, the more the better, the harder the guarantee, right? So I think that's it's not an ephemeral kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
How can we reassure you? How can you assure the investors, the private investors, that's supposed to bring in $500 billion to rebuild the country? Ask them. Ask Scott Bessent. He is a former hedge fund manager, U.S. Treasury Secretary. Ask Lutnick, the Trade Secretary. He is also a business. Lots of people around Trump who are business people, successful or not, but at least they can tell you what kind of guarantee do they need to invest trillions and trillions or $500 billion. So that's not a big, we need to talk to them. We need to probably get them to answer that question themselves, rather than ask Zelensky, what kind of guarantee do you need? Well, he's okay as he is. He's protected, hopefully. He needs to be more protected, obviously, because I think his life is in danger now, obviously, from both sides. Or from one side, which is now have two nuclear powers in cahoots.
Well, maybe you can sum up and give some final words, and for the end of our conversation, maybe some message.
So what needs to happen is that Ukraine needs to be given enough support to stabilize the front line and to have the extra cards to play against Putin and Trump. On the Ukrainian side, you need to go, I'm afraid, total war. Right? It needs to be total mobilization, command economy. We cannot fight this as a kind of private partnership anymore. On the European side, there has to be not total war, but has to be state intervention on a massive scale, because we cannot continue having these tenders published in the European journal and for years and years, and having the discussions of commercial deals. The weapons need to be produced now, should be produced 3 years ago. So on the European scale, you need to have state intervention to defense industry fast. You try to replicate the American weapons fast. You try to buy them, the ones you cannot replicate, fast. And that can create a little bit of breathing space. We are looking at, we need probably a year, right? Ukraine probably half a year of resources to fight on. I suspect you need probably 12 months from now on of the front line to be as it is now, at least, for the Americans and Russians to understand that the black money is not working very well, and also for the Russian economy gradually to produce the results that we hope it will produce, i.e. more damage to people's living standards. Mm-hmm. So I think that's kind of the task that we have.
Okay, Vlad, thank you so much for your deep insight and again for your time. And I hope that the just peace to Ukraine will be brought rather sooner or late, nor later. Yeah. So, so hopefully the war will start soon and the recovery of Ukraine will start.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks a lot. Thanks for inviting
Thank you
me.
so much again.
All the best.
Bye.
Cheers. Cheers.